So we'll see. I mean, of course, Derxello is a very familiar face to a lot of the community, as well as us, so we really want to see him do well. But it's going to be a matchup against Lexan, who's brought a bunch of very unique decks, and it looks like he's kicking off with PTP Forest again.
Ooh, Altered Fate's drawn for once. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
But would he keep it in his opening hand, I wonder?
I honestly, with the luck you've been given today, I think he would have, and he didn't actually keep it. Oh no.
What an interesting matchup, actually, because Lexan's path to Purgatory Forest, I don't think, knowing he's against D-Shift, I guess, like his previous games, this time he actually hopes not to find the PTP pieces. I think his game plan is going to be to play as aggressively as possible.
I normally play a lot of control mirrors, so I'll let everybody know how this usually goes. Usually you don't want to summon things into Dimensional Shift Rune. If you summon followers, they're able to cast spells like Kaleidoscopic Glow, Wind Blast, Fiery Embrace. They're able to spell boost their spells, which are just going to end up being Dimensional Shift. We did see Derxello mulligan all 3 of the cards in his hand looking for Dimensional Shift and still didn't. So he does actually have Merlin to find it on 4, but unfortunately he's not boosting anything relevant at the moment, so...
Mm-hmm.
And on the converse of that, Path to Purgatory Forest will sometimes just summon things because when they die, they get shadows, and that's fine. So it's kind of weird. It's almost like both players are kind of helping each other combo off. It's very, very weird. So
yeah, I find though that the fact that D-Shift will win the game on the turn that its combo has been fully collected, as opposed to PTP or Path to Purgatory needing an upwards of anywhere from 2 to 3 turns to get that damage in. I'd say perhaps Lexan would be playing as aggressively as possible, and I think right there was a really interesting thing to see from him, in that if he played, or if he held a Fairy in hand, then he would have had a chance for a really, really strong turn of just playing Fairy Fairy Elf Song, board full of 2/2s, commits it, but it actually comes back to him due to Kaleidoscopic Glow. I think the effect and the amount of damage he gets off of this Elf Song could be a very important detail for how this matchup goes.
right, he's not playing Liza, so he can't protect these, but these are pushing pretty important damage because he knows that Merlin wants to come down. And I actually love that Derxello drew a new card in Starforged Legends called Magic Owl. It's a 2-play point 2/2 bronze card, bronze follower, that when it evolves will spell boost your hand for 2. So very, very interesting card being picked up by Dimensional Shift decks.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, another Elf Song. And off of that, I think a lot of people didn't really pay much attention to Magic Owl at first until some discovery started to happen with it, in that the 2 spell boosts and the tempo recovered by evolving it in a list that usually doesn't need to use its evolutions otherwise on Merlin for any particular purpose is an amazing source of acceleration. That said, acceleration and tempo is exactly what Derxello needs here. 2 Elf Songs resolving on a turn where Lexan could spend an evolution point face is leaving him very dangerously low.
Right, that does just get him hit in the face for a complete and total 8 damage, so he's now down to 9, below 10, so Forrest could just pull a Roach combo off the top to finish him off if he's not too careful here.
Mm-hmm. Now, how much damage is Derxello capable of clearing here? Between Wind Blast gives him just enough to play the Fiery Embrace.
Mm-hmm. And Magic Owl being a great, amazing player in that play, like boosting twice, able to play a spell boosting the Embrace for 3, when normally no other follower would do that outside of Spectral Wizard, which most people don't know what it even does because no one plays it, so.
Clark sort of stole his house and his keys. Now,
and Altered Fate is found for Lexan finally, so.
Gosh, it's very interesting to see where Lexan takes this, because I feel that after that Magic Owl has restored the board to Derxello, Lexan does play Rhinoceroches, but he's gotten a lot of damage already. He doesn't have much more in this hand to find just by playing more fairies out. So what he draws into with his Altered Fate, how he continues his cycle, he either will be finding damage off of Rhinoceroch, or perhaps digging far enough to actually get a PTP off. So I'm very intrigued on seeing how his deck treats him here.
And this is actually a turn that Lexan didn't want Derxello to have. He caught a reprieve in the board state and he's able to play Merlin, evolve her, and dig for even more spells. He doesn't actually have any win condition in his hand, but he does have a dimensional shift that's getting pretty low.
Another thing to mention that's interesting to me is that I've noticed this is a pattern between many lists. Lexan plays his D-shift list this very same way, and that it seems Flame Destroyer, which was once the traditional win condition of D-shift, has now been dropped to a single 1-of, and it is played next to 3 Chimeras and 1 copy of Giant Chimera. Both players do this, and really, this is not something that I'm used to seeing.
It's mostly just because every board state in the game needs an answer, and Little Chimera is a great answer, while Giant Chimera is a great way to just win the game. So.
So Lexan deciding not to toss this hand as though there's something in it he wants to keep, even though he's starting to fall behind in damage in his board. I mean, his hand doesn't really have any damage he can throw out from it.
Sword Cash being a great top deck there. He can keep spell boosting, but he's unfortunately still in a position where he can't actually close the game out, no matter how small this dimensional shift gets. Oh, that's unfortunate.
Has used all of his evolution points. Perhaps that is part of the cost of getting that tempo from Magic Owl, is starts to cause the deck to become a bit more reliant on removal later. Perhaps he's thinking whether he needs necessarily to commit something like Chimera here to clear the board, and that he has 1 Wind Blast, and probably is trying to read off of Lexan how much damage he needs to mitigate immediately.
Golem Assault, oddly enough, can sometimes help you win games in Dimensional Shift. If you play it for the Enhance, you gain access to 3/3/3s, so worst case scenario, that can be used to win if your Dimensional Shift gets so low.
I think a pivotal part of this is how long it's going to take Lexan to find a Rhinoceroach. At any point, with the existence of these Nature's Guidances, he's just on the edge of being able to have lethal with this hand. Has a lot of bounces. Perhaps that's why he's holding this Altered Fate, because he knows that Roach is a quick way to win, and if he just finds it with this hand, that's it.
He's actually very close to just Altered Fating into Roach into lethal. If he finds, if he Altered Fates into Roach, Nature's Roach, that's pretty close.
Ooh, I like the way he plays this very much. He both generates an immense amount of shadows here, but also has a lot of cards played. Now, does he actually play out this Altered Fate? I think
definitely, yes, every time. I do like the old trick, finding a way to make it back in the game. The whole cards that add 2 fairies to your hand, if you have too many cards, will actually just generate a shadow by overkilling one of the fairies. So.
Right, now this hand, he's found 2 Roaches, considering everything. He doesn't have a bounce in it, but I think he can play 2 fairies out and do 3, 4 with it, and then the Elf Song adds on to the damage they deal. So this is a lethal hand from Lexan, meaning Derxello has to have it this turn.
He unfortunately does not have lethal in his hand. He can do a solid 9-ish. His Dimensional Shift's basically free with this hand, so he can't enhance the Golem Assault, unfortunately. Ooh, that's not a good draw.
Though Derxello is deprived of the information we have on what Lexan just drew into, he may have some idea that Lexan just threw out an Altered Fate, so there's an immense threat against him, both 30 shadows now, hasn't seen a Roach yet, so probably drawing into them. So this all comes down to how much Derxello reads as far as how much danger is he in right now, because he could use this extra turn from the Dimension Shift to develop his Golem Assault, and doing so would prevent some Roach damage.
He could, but doing that throws away your win condition, and I think I like those singular, without knowing perfect information, I like the singular Golem Assault play anyway.
Indeed.
You died a double. Ooh, never mind. He didn't cast it, so he's just dead. Wow.
Perhaps he wanted the Golem Assault to mount a bit more of a body in this hand. I think, between Golem Assault, the Chimera, and the 2 summon the Clay Golems, I think that would be enough damage. No, never mind. It would need a second D-shift. I always just count it as if all has Storm. Yeah, I suppose Derxello really was
second
just
D-shift for the followers to attack.
Right. I multiply it by 2 in my head, like, by instinct. But right, it seems Derxello just simply couldn't find his way of getting his win conditions out, despite the massive amount of spell boosting he did. Had a D-shift all the way down to 0. But Lexan could just choose any way to win that game.
And that's it's quite unfortunate for Derxello. He's now 1 loss away. I think this is a lower bracket, so he could just be knocked out if he loses 1 more.
Hmm.
But I believe in you, Derxello. I believe in you.
Hmm. I think that was actually perhaps Derxello's most nightmarish matchup, in that PTP Forest does play as though I mean, it has a combo win condition, but just the fact that it can mount so much damage early on with its elf songs as it did, gives it a huge edge against a deck like D-Shift. But now, having to play Atomy versus
Dimensional Shift. This is... You know how this goes? Can you tell me how this goes?
This feels to me like it's completely dependent on a couple of factors that can swing it in either player's way, which is a Lord Enemy too early on for Lexan to deal with is the end of the game. No Lord Enemy that cannot be dealt, or that can be dealt with, or it comes out too late, just simply makes it simple for D-Shift to deal with.
Oh my gosh, both players getting a hand neither wants to mulligan. That's not likely in 2 combo decks to happen ever, but... This is very interesting. This is very tense.
About to get this damage through. Angelic Snipe not enough to take his hat off.
If Derxello is able to play an early enough Atomy that triggers an early enough staircase, then this game will be his for sure. And there's another 1-drop.
He's developing it. He could very easily have this next turn.
He could very easily turn 3 Atomy, which is unanswerable. Kaleidoscopic Glow, a great draw, though. He can bounce. Ellen is slowing him down for a turn. That was huge.
But it's worth noting that Lexan's hand is not developing a Fiery Embrace or anything like that, so Derxello might have some time to work on this.
Oh my gosh. Turn 4 Atomy. With Bone Chimera top deck, turn 4 Atomy is almost guaranteed.
So there is no evolution point available just yet. It is only turn 3. There is no option for removal on the side of Lexan here. This is a fully resolved board. This is damage that is fully resolved. And when this Atomy comes down, how is Lexan supposed to deal with it?
He doesn't.
I suppose he needed it to happen.
The only upside to what's going to happen to Lexan next turn is that Derxello hopefully won't trigger a Staircase to Paradise. He'd have to top deck that, which means that Derxello's hand would be, outside of Soul Conversion plays, would be pretty devoid of follow-up plays.
The closest thing I was able to reason there as a way to kill an enemy is had Lexan played his Angelic Snipe earlier, his Chimera would have costed 8, and then... Or no, it did cost 8, and that would have costed 7, and then that turn, if he played the Sorcery Cache on it, it would be at 4, and then playing it on the enemy and evolving it into it would have been a way to kill it, but then again, that is also a very, very specific and informed way to play it out, so there's absolutely no surprise on not going for it, but I think that was also the only actual way to deal with this enemy immediately. And this enemy does not win the game yet. He can find something or some way to start to chip damage into it. Derxello has a pretty slow series of cards in his hand. It's starting to turn reactive.
He would if Derxello hadn't drawn double Soul Squasher. So anything that Lexan chooses to evolve and attack the skeleton with is going to get Soul Squashed.
Right. Okay, I like this play. By doing this, if he decides to crash this damage into the enemy, actually, never mind. Simply evolving the enemy puts it out of the range where Chimera can kill it with the effect.
Yes.
Though, evolving the Chimera...
I mean, it would put him in a situation where he could kill something with Chimera on the into the battlefield and then evolve the Chimera into it, so I do still like that. Double Magic Owl will be interesting here. The correct play here is to definitely crash this into Atomy, and he doesn't, unfortunately, so he's going to get hit face for 10 and probably just die right here.
As that did deprive him of the only game plan he could have had to take care of this Atomy. Now it just simply seems that it has slipped away from Lexan to survive this. So meaning...
And Derxello, navigating that game perfectly, is probably just going to end on the following turn. I don't think there's much Lexan can do at all.
Right. Merlin is just... She's not going to be able to play anything that she searches from Lexan's deck on the spot. He could throw an Angelic Barrage and it could tink off of Atomy's head, and that is really the last option he has of trying to get it off the board before it just sort of beheads him with that giant sword he's holding.
Well, he can clear it. He can Angelic Snipe anything, if he wants to, just to get the reduction, and then use the entire Chimera to kill Atomy. But it wouldn't matter because an Evolve is left on the side, and Lexan is only at 4 life, and he realizes that and surrenders.
Meaning that this takes us to a mirror match between D-shifts and 2 lists that are very similar at that.
This is a dreaded matchup. You don't want to hit this if you're a Dimensional Shift player. If you're queuing into ladder, you don't want to see other D-shift players. It's kind of like an awkward pause when you run into each other and realize it. And this is pretty awkward to play this matchup.
Right. The only difference that I can spot between their lists is that they run the different arts of Merlin, and that there's been one swapped out copy of Kaleidoscopic Glow, I think merely for an additional copy of Conjure Golem, and that is the single card difference we're about to see. So, I think that is a pretty interesting difference for this matchup alone, because I would say then that the player who has the additional copy of summoning the Golem is at a very, very, very slight disadvantage, just because usually there are no targets for Kaleidoscopic Glow in this matchup at all.
Neither player, if you notice quickly, both players did not have Dimensional Shift in their hand, and both quickly mulliganed their entire hand. This entire matchup usually hinges on whoever has Dimensional Shift in their hand opening hand will probably win as they're boosting it first, but neither of them found it. Neither of them won the D-Shift lottery on the mulligan.
Right. And even aside from the
neither
D-Shift...
of them still have it. So this is actually a pretty interesting mind game, where both players are going to boost random cards in their hand, and the other one thinks that they're boosting Dimensional Shift when they actually aren't in reality.
They could just be counting the entire time, but...
Right.
I guess another thing is that each has 3 D-Shifts and 1 copy of Chimera, or the Giant Chimera, which I think if found...
Zillow finds it.
There's one. I think finding the Giant Chimera is also very significant.
Though, and he doesn't want to cast that, so...
Right. Not half bad at all. Lexan's still going to need to find it here. Goes for the Fate's Hand. Into 2 Angelic
Double snipes. That's so unfortunate for Lexan, but if he does top deck D-Shift next turn, he can boost the heck out of it. And Derxello even finds Giant Chimera. He finds his win condition. He can bounce the Golem back to his own hand to prevent any boosts from Lexan.
Derxello not having any trouble with the famed Derxello bricks here, but Lexan still looking for it. Ooh, and his Kaleidoscopic Glow just a little too late. Though,
Lexan has one of the cheeky new plays. I love this. You play Magic Owl, you evolve it, and then bounce it back to your own hand. I love this play. But it doesn't matter because his hand is all Angelic Snipes.
Just empties it out the tiniest bit. Just so that he can draw some more, unfortunately. 13 cards into his deck, still no D-Shift. Still nothing to really work on other than this lone Wind Blast, it seems. Meanwhile, I suppose one of the most important details is whether or not Derxello is able to find a way to win the game in time, but given this space
Derxello
of
is top decking into exactly what he needs, finds even the Sorcery Cache.
If Lexan cannot find something to work on soon, Derxello is approaching both a super boosted Chimera and a Dimension Shift that he's been working on for some time now.
So Lexan does find a regular Giant Chimera, but that doesn't really help if you can't shift into it, since 9 play points are hard to actually reach. The whole way you get to Giant Chimera is sort of like tempo dimensional shifting your way into it, kind of ramping yourself.
Derxello losing a card off the top, but might not be the most important detail considering his hand does still have some remaining cycle in it. Unfortunately, this does also mean that he is forced to commit a little bit to board here. Or, if it just so happens that he doesn't have to, then that too could be something.
Right. Derxello already has the combo in his hand, so he actually doesn't care about cards that he mills. Getting rid of a card off top at random is not as big of a punish as leaving something on board that your opponent can interact with, so...
Lexan is starting to find some of the follower portions of it, but he is almost halfway through his deck, and there is his
finally. First dimensional shift drawn for Lexan, while Derxello has one at half cost, which is not what you want in the matchup at all.
But now, interestingly enough, I think part of an important piece for Derxello is that it does seem that his hand has actually run dry of cycle. He has now the golems, and that's really it. He has removal. But his hand now
His
stopped.
giant chimera should be boosted around, roughly 10 damage, however.
Mhm.
So, assuming it is, he could just evolve this regular chimera, dimension shift next turn, evolve regular chimera, and then play the giant chimera for exactly 17. I think it's doing roughly 10 damage at the moment. I could be miscalculating a little bit.
With an additional
there it
4 being
goes.
built.
Owl bounce.
That is
I
such
love
a
it.
cute and cheeky combo. But with 2 evolution orbs also still fully available to use, hasn't had to use a magic owl to boost at all. That is an additional potential 4 damage or so being dealt across 2 turns.
It looks like I'm probably correct. I think he has exact lethal here. So, or maybe 1 over. It goes for the full taunt. I like.
The confidence in those taunts give me the impression that he does. But he has 13 shadows. I'm trying to recall exactly what turn or what spell he had played the Chimera on. All of those shadows, I believe, are spellcast. He hasn't had a follower die yet. So I think it is highly likely that, yep, 12 damage. Just 1 above what he needed.
Whew, so satisfying. I love giant chimera lethals. They're so satisfying.
There it is. Derxello will actually take the win here and defeat Lexan with the D-Shift deck in the mirror match. And that is a very... not a mirror match that we see very often, but it is quite...
No, it's not. Not at NGE. Not in tournaments, no.
No.
First I've seen it, actually, in NG.
Yeah. I